my pleasure to introduce Holly Tomcak, who will be sharing her presentation on Ephemera, collection of poetry. It's a little bit about the author. Holly is a 7th through 12th English language arts education major with a minor in creative writing at Wayne State College. She spent her early years growing up in her father's hometown of Linwood, Nebraska, before her family moved to her mother's hometown of Howells, Nebraska. Holly originally attended the University of South Dakota to study psychology before transferring to Wayne to pursue her current degree. While at WSC, she's participated in intercollegiate forensics and been a member of Pi Kappa Delta, Sigma Tau Delta, and the honors program. In her free time, Holly enjoys writing poetry, as well as creative nonfiction and fiction. She's placed in 5 WSC poetry slams, 3 of which were first place finishes. Yay. She has been a contributor for 3 editions of WSC's literary magazine, The Judascope, was the 2023, 24, and 24-25 recipient of the Althea Acer Steele Burgess Poetry Prize, and placed 3rd in the 2023 Nebraska Poetry Society Performance Poetry Contest. She's also had photography published in the Farm Girl Press's literary journal, The Gilded Butterbean. Holly spends some of her free time judging and coaching high school speech and coaching a high school one-act play production. After obtaining her bachelor's degree, she plans to stay at WSC to earn a master's of science and education with focus in English. So let's give Holly a round of applause.
Fair disclaimer, I've been sick, I still am sick, so we're going to try to get through this without me devolving into a coughing fit. So yeah, my project was creating a collection of poetry, which is titled Ephemera, Collection of Poetry. So we can just dive into the creation of that, kind of from start to finish, and maybe read something at the end. So ephemera is a plural noun that means things that exist or are used for a short time. The word is often used to describe things that you wouldn't usually keep, like ticket stubs or postcards, things that you might shove into a book and then forget it's there, kind of thing. And I kind of liked using that term to describe maybe more some intangible things that also kind of have the same quality. Time, you know, it's something I think we take for granted a lot, and in a weird way, our lives are a bit like ephemera in the grand scheme of existence, and maybe that's a little deep, but you know. And so it's about time and sentimentality and mortality. A lot of the poems kind of vary from different kind of inspirations. So objects as inspirations. I am sentimental. You maybe could call it hoarding, but I keep a lot of, like, I have birthday cards from years and years and years. I've got all these different things from trips I've taken, boat tickets from when I was overseas in 2019. Like, they're all just kind of stuffed in bins in the corner of my room. And so I kind of pulled some of those out and wrote poetry based on kind of those objects and what they kind of represented to me. My grandmother, who passed away in October 2017, she was kind of the first major person in my life that I lost. And so a few poems in here I kind of draw inspiration from that experience and what her life kind of meant for me and what her death kind of meant for me. And then just combating mental illness and depression and suicidal ideation and how that has played a role in my life. And so I kind of, throughout writing this, I created a playlist and just kind of listened to that and felt the feeling behind that and used that as kind of a way to push me to exploring things that I sometimes would avoid thinking about. And so the style of the collection is autobiographical and confessional, so both kind of interweave in a way. I kind of picture autobiographical as being more like what you can see and what happens on the outside, versus the confessional, which feels a lot more inward and putting your thoughts and feelings out into the world. So yeah, it's very eye-focused, very like ruminating on things, and just combining the inward dialogue with the outward happenings. And so form, I particularly do a lot of free verse, blank verse, not a lot of rhyme, like particular strict rhyme or meter. I don't know. I started with free verse and I kind of just kept with free verse, but I do have a few poems in the book that are, I have a couple haiku, which is a 5, 7, and 5, so a little just short poem. And then I have a couple prose poems as well, which is essentially just a poem in paragraph form. So that's kind of how I tackled that. And there are some that are formatted a little funky, which Chad was maybe a little like, why? But I like to play with form a little bit, so I'll be reading one of my form poems after I go through all of this fun stuff. So for design, the software I used Canva to create the cover of the book. And then I used Adobe InDesign for the insides. So Canva has a free version, but I use Canva Pro. I'm not sure what it is month to month, but it is $120 per year. So if you're going to use it, be sure that you're really getting your money's worth. Same with Adobe InDesign. You can individually use Adobe InDesign for around $14. If you're a student or teacher, you can get the entire Creative Cloud, which includes Adobe InDesign and like Photoshop and all sorts of stuff, for around $20 a month. So if you're going to go into doing a book and stuff, you're going to know it's a financial commitment to do so. For layout, the full layout in there, it has the front matter, so it has half title, full title, it has the copyright, and then acknowledgements, table of contents, and each of those things kind of has a strict font like points. So a lot of like the titles in the book and the like half title and stuff, they all stay at around 14-point font. A lot of the body text stays at around 11-point font, which is pretty typical and standard. The copyright page is at 9-point. You kind of want that to be its own little invisible thing that you don't really, because not a lot of people care about that unless they're using your book for like research or paper and stuff, and you want them to get to the good stuff. So throughout the content, the poems are formatted center to each page, and then the titles of each poem is flush left to the poem, so they're in line, except for a few of the smaller or shorter poems, because it kind of looked a little silly. So we made the decision to center the titles to the poem as well for those shorter poems, just so that it looked a little more nice and not weird. So in using InDesign, you can create parent pages, so you can do formatting specifically for all of your front matter, and you can do formatting for your content back half. So I used an A parent page, which was my front matter. There wasn't really any special formatting on there, but with Adobe InDesign, which is really nice, you can set guides, which is essentially just, there's a ruler on the side, you pick where you want all your stuff to set, you click it, it'll create a guide that will disappear when you're printing or exporting into PDF, but then you can make sure all of your titles and content are kind of where you want them to be on every single page. And so I did the same thing with the B parent, but you also add page numbers, which is very nice, so you don't have to go and individually do it every single time. It's very lovely. And then just the choice of using justified text instead of like centering or left aligned or right aligned to make it look cohesive for the acknowledgements and for the author dial. And then then there were a lot of creative choices that were just things that I did for fun. So you might be looking throughout this and you're like, man, that title font is so fun, but why on earth did you choose Times New Roman? Times New Roman is boring. I've gotten a lot of flack for that from a certain someone. I chose it because of the name of the font, because it's time theme, Times New Roman. Yeah, that's funny. And then the font for the title, and as you can see, it's very magazine clipping, cutting, pasting. It's called Drunken Hour. So I thought it looked very ephemera-esque, and it had a title that was very ephemera-esque to me and kind of fit my theme. And so those are just little fun things for me that you get to know, because it's not like I wrote it anywhere in there, but you're in on my little secret. Within the book, I believe it's pages 17 and page 30, you will notice that there are blank pages with just a page number on it. That is not typical. If you were a professional, you would probably look at that and be like, why does that exist? If you go to the table of contents, you will see that those are listed as wastes of space. And the poem in between them, which if you would like to take a minute to read, it's very short, but also 12 pages long. I promise that makes sense if you look at it. It essentially talks about being a waste of space, and so in order to format it the way I wanted it to, I made the creative choice to just list those as wastes of space and put nothing on them. So, the cover choices. So the cover has kind of something I threw together in Canva. It's got a lot of pressed flowers, which I have a poem in here that kind of talks about saving dried flowers or pressed flowers and kind of keeping those things, even though they're, for all intents and purposes, dead and useless, but in a way they have their own kind of beauty. And then the pocket watch, time, and then the back cover has another pressed flower up on it. And then obviously the font choices on there, there's still Drunken Hour and then Times New Roman. And then we can kind of move on to publication. So this book is self-published. You can essentially, when publishing, you can go through a press, kind of like WSC Press, Farnborough Press. You can go through different presses that will, not all of them accept manuscripts and will publish books, but a lot of them will. And so essentially there's the process of submitting your manuscript and getting it accepted. I didn't have a lot of time for that, so I made the decision, and for creative control, to go self-publishing route. So I did it through KDP, which is Kindle Direct Publishing. It's Amazon. You can do other options, but this is the most feasible and cost-effective and time-effective for me. An ISBN can cost anywhere from $70 to upwards of $120 for one. You can buy them in bundles or packages, which is great for presses, but if you're an individual with just one book, it can get expensive. But KDP provides a free ISBN, and they will create your barcode for you, so you don't even have to bother with that. Once you send in the cover and everything, they will create the barcode and insert it on the back and do it for you, so no extra cost there. For pricing of the book, industry standard for a poetry book is probably around $16 right about now. It's a first book, it's a self-published book. It's not a super long book, I would say. It's definitely not small enough to be a chapbook, but it's not long. So I settled on publishing it and putting it at around $10. And QR code thing, it's live. You can go to Amazon and it is there and you can purchase it, which was kind of a surreal experience. But there are sometimes some challenges, especially if you're not familiar with doing the publishing through KDP, or you're not familiar with publishing work in general. So the spine of the book, this is a proof copy, so you can order a proof copy before you actually make it available online, so you can check for mistakes. Like this one, we found a mistake on the copyright page. There was a mistake there, and we were able to fix it before we put it out. On the proof they sent, I did have text on the binding. You'll see on the books that you have out there that there is no text on the binding. That is because they have a page amount that you have to meet to be able to do text. So even though it popped up here and it looks great on here, they won't print it that way. So my book has 62 pages. You need to have 79 to be able to have some lovely side text there. As well as printing priority. So we started the process of like trying to find a way to publish and print prior to Easter, like early April. And so by the time things were said and done, I submitted it. It takes upwards of around 72 hours for them to approve it and then publish it. So it took a couple days, and then I found out that I had to remove the text from the binding to be able to get it published and printed. So it took another then 3 days to do that and get that approved. And the thing is, you can purchase author copies, which are essentially a cheaper copy of the book that's not full price because it is your book, and so you can order those. But the priority for printing goes to paying customers on Amazon. So the books, if I had ordered them on Saturday, they would have gotten here the 9th, which is fairly quick in terms of like the grand scheme of shipping and printing and all that stuff, but in terms of having a deadline, not super great. But if I ordered them just through Amazon at their full price, they got here yesterday. So they prioritize the printing of paying customers' books before they will prioritize author copies. So that's just something to think about. And then when we were working on the book, something happened pretty early on where we were essentially stuck. We did a split so that the page numbers would start for the content and not include the beginning, and because of that we had to rearrange some stuff. So the acknowledgements is before the table of contents, when typically it would be after, because there was page number snafu that we couldn't manage to fix. But in my opinion, I kind of like it before the table of contents. I feel like the table of contents is kind of like the start of the content. So anyway, I suppose I can read some stuff out of the book if you would like. That's something I can do. So the first poem I'll be reading is page 2, ephemera, title piece. Many things adopt the adjective of fleeting. Thoughts and feelings, the card I found in the book I've been reading, not for my eyes to see, but I have never been one to pick a fight with curiosity. A hallmark emblazoned with the words, time flies. Gifted to a friend from his fiancée turned wife, telling him how she couldn't wait to start their life together. Inside, the handwritten letter spelled out, I can't wait to kiss my husband, with a little heart etched to the right. And though I know he loves her, he's talked about separating once or twice over outside factors strangling vice, while this token of their love sits forgotten betwixt the bindings of a borrowed copy of Andy Weir's The Martian. Time flies. When I was younger, I believed in happily ever after. Now, when I inquire to my mother as to if she loves my father, she hesitates, then states, we just work. And I guess everything inevitably adopts the adjective of fleeting. Leave them up. Next will be page 8. My take on the great pie versus cake debate. My grandmother used to make apple pie on my birthday. I hate cake. It tends to taste ashy in my mouth, sickly sweet like decay, so she would make me pie because I hate cake. And she loved me. Homemade crust meant flour splatters left on the countertops, Granny Smith apples laid to rest in a doughy tomb, a knife stabbed through the top for good measure, baked then cooled like a corpse. She'd pipe, "Happy birthday, Holly," across the top in icing. I never wanted to share, but I could never eat an entire pie by myself, so several slices ended up wasted and unappreciated. I wish she would have piped, "Here lies Holly's childhood," on the top when I turned 17. Maybe then, when my mother placed a piece of cake in front of me on the day I turned 18, it wouldn't have felt like a funeral. And then on page 10, Butterflies Repose. I passed my time in her hospital room, singing off key and folding paper butterflies from rainbow sticky notes, a kaleidoscope as colorful as her. They filled the room, a flutter of paper wings beating upon the heart monitor. I laid them in her hair, in her hands, and on her heart. And when the singing and the beating stopped, I placed a few in my pocket for safekeeping. And on the day of her funeral, I stood by her casket. I laid them in her hand, in her hands, and on her heart. So sorry. Pause for intermission. We sealed them there together in a cocoon of oak and satin. I hope when the metamorphosis is complete, she'll rise from her chrysalis with paper wings of her own. Then she can place them in my hair, in my hands, and on my heart. I knew it was going to happen. Next we'll do consumption, which is on page 32. This is the fourth poem I was talking about. The glass starts full when you place the straw to your parched lips. You begin to suck up a sugary sweet substance, and instantly you want more, more, more. The line lowers as the liquid departs rapidly in your fervor. Suddenly the glass stands there, half full or half empty, depending on personal perspective. There's crisis in the way you consume, but never really enjoy, like how your own mother would scold you for tearing through food instead of savoring its flavor. So you slow down, attempt to do what she taught you, but one sip too late, you are left with nearly nothing, trying desperately to taste those last few drops of joy. The straw emits a horrid gurgling, not unlike a dying man. Then it's over. The glass is empty, and now, so are you. The next would be the pacemaker on page 41. I started tracking the days, not by hours or minutes, but by beats of the heart, where thump thump kind of starts to sound like tick-tock. There's a murmur in my brain to remind me of the arrhythmia of time, always flying by too fast or too slow, but never just right. I'm searching for a way to regulate my life's rhythm and rate, a way to set a pace that will carry me to the end of the line. But science has yet to invent a pacemaker for the mind. I went to page 42, an experiment on the correlation between quantity and quality. We spend 10% of our waking hours with our eyes closed, and 26 years of our lives dreaming. So I spend my days barely blinking and my nights barely sleeping in hopes that I can steal back a fraction of the moments I've been missing. And then I will end my reading on page 45, a reflection on the house that built me. friends with broken families thought I had it all, while dozens of photographs lined their walls. For years my hall sat faceless, vacant, barring the Last Supper hung above the dining room table. We know how to put the nuclear in nuclear family, our house the fallout graveyard of post-calamity, the sidewalk solidified devoid of tiny handprints, the fridge sat free from the weight of art magnets. We didn't bury the dog beneath our willow's branches. My parents left her at the crematorium and never looked back. A lifetime of love and laughter reduced to ash. They're oblivious to the things I buried in life's absence. A wooden box concealing various trinkets. I am so sorry. They're oblivious to the things I've buried in life's absence. A wooden box concealing various trinkets, an offering to a God who might actually listen, dense in the drywall, just out of vision, memories I knew would stay perfectly hidden. I took a blade to my open palm and sliced it, bled upon the soil as proof of my life, and my house may be a corpse, but I am not. My cheeks blush red and my blood runs hot. Pieces of history I have left behind took the skeleton of a house and made it alive. This house did not build me. I built this house. I kind of went pretty far over time. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer some.
Holly, I'm curious about, I think you said early on that there was a playlist that you used
Yes.
when you wrote, and I assume that is of music,
Yes.
and I'm curious how that impacted the writing. Like, what was in the playlist in general terms, and did you always listen to it when you wrote? Was it a part of the process?
So not always, but I think like the concept, when I do a lot of my writing, a lot of my ideas kind of come from music and songs that I'm listening to. And so over the summer, I had this kind of, and I'd always been like interested in this concept of like time, mortality, sentimentality. But over the summer, I listened to a song while I was flying out to California. It's called Wait, I believe M83 is the name of the artist. I would have to go back and check. And it kind of gave me this like feeling like your last moments when you're like flashing through your life. That's kind of the feel it gave me. And so I was like, okay. And I just kind of like started pulling through music I had heard before that kind of gave me a similar feeling or like a sentimental feeling. And then like new music kind of, because Spotify does this wonderful thing where it recommends songs to you when you make a playlist. And so I kind of just was building and taking inspiration from those songs. And so, yeah, it kind of spans all sorts of things. Like the title for Butterflies Repose is a song. It's from a song title. And so I believe I had written that with a different title. And I'm just like, no, this is right. This is what it needs to be. And so I would say like lyrics kind of inspire sometimes for me to write something, and sometimes just tunes. So yeah, it exists, and I'm happy to share it, and later share the list of songs. But it's got a lot of things. I mean, if you're a Harry Styles fan, it has Sign of the Times. It's a bunch of just different 7 years. Lucas Graham is on there. You know, it's just a bunch of hodgepodge of my weirdo music and some maybe more common music.
Do you still listen to it?
I do. I was listening to it this morning.
So if you start a new book, you have to start a new playlist, right?
That is the goal. I love making playlists. It's like one of my favorite pastimes. Like, I'm an avid Dungeons and Dragons player, and all of my characters have playlists or inspired. It's fun for me to do. It's a pastime. It's a way to connect, I guess. I mean, and music in its own way is poetry. So it's just a pretty poetry. So.
Was there a group of poems that did not make it in this book?
Yeah. I kind of went back and forth. So I started a lot of, so the second half of the book has a lot of shorter poems. A lot of just really snappy, like, I wrote them in 5 minutes, and maybe I did some editing, but like, they were just quick, and it kind of gives or lends to like the theme a little bit too, because I just really started like snapping through a short poem, it's like not wasting time, and then as it came to the end, I wanted some longer pieces, and so I slowed down a little bit and just kind of sat with them a bit. But there are some like of the shorter ones that I was like, it just doesn't really like deliver the message I want, or it just doesn't feel powerful enough. So that's the thing with short poems, is they have to say a lot in a little bit of words, you know, and so sometimes I just didn't think they made the cut. So they're sitting in Google Drive, existing.
Okay, I have one more question about the publishing, maybe two. I guess pricing is one. Like you said, you wanted it to be around $10, but I'm sure Amazon takes their cut or somehow
Yes.
gets paid.
Yes.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about that. And then do you have to have it more print ready for a place like that as opposed to like the WSC Press or Farm Bureau Press or something like that?
Yeah, so when you're going to a press to do the work, they do a lot of the design and like, so essentially like you give your words, you get some input, but like a lot, like the format of the book and stuff is done in like together or on the press's side. Whereas for this, you really have to do it kind of on your own. They give you like the guidelines of like, here's the measurements each thing needs to be to do this thing. But it's mostly on your and they do get a cut. So ordering the author copies are cheaper, and then you can like sell them in person, and you can sell them full price, and you might get a little bit more. But Amazon, yeah. So it's listed as like $10. By the time Amazon goes through it, if someone were to buy my book, I would probably get around $3 to $4 of that. So it's a smaller cut, but I'm also like, I'm just happy to have it out there realistically. So boo corporations, but yay book, I guess, you know. It is past 11:30, so.
Thank you, Holly.